the concept of pain, which is, a difficult one. And we could be talking physical pain, we could be talking emotional pain. It's a universal experience. Some people deal with it more chronically than others, and certainly our hearts go out to people who are in that situation. And it's I want to talk a bit about pain because it's always a little tricky as a pastor. What do you say to people, because it is a really difficult subject. I'm talking the debilitating pain, and again, this could be physical, this could be mental anguish. How do you hold that? Well, I'd start out by saying this, that it's just a few points to really remember. One is God never gives anybody pain as a test, to kind of see how you're doing. God is always going to join us in our pain. He's not going to inflict pain on us. And that's why I think again and again, it comes back to the incredible significance of the Easter story, that we have to keep coming back to the Easter story. Christmas story is beautiful and wonderful. Just went through it, which is great. And the Easter story, especially in adult years, is much more like, oh yeah, I get this, because Jesus walks that journey of struggle, that journey of pain, both from a mental standpoint, from a physical standpoint, walks that journey. And that idea of God walking with us through all those things is incredibly important. And I want to read for you a passage here, and it's talking about, sort of the way the Lord sees things. And it's written from a Christian U Church perspective. We're talking about the story of Abraham here, and Abraham on a number of different levels. Abraham can picture our spiritual development. It can also, at a much higher level, way beyond what we can do as human beings, can picture as well God's own, the Lord's spiritual development too, and Lord in the form of Jesus. And this is what it says, which is really, I found this a beautiful line reading it this morning. When people read the words, "Please let anger not blaze in my Lord, and let me speak," then heavenly angels, in other words, the highest angels, immediately sense a kind of distress. And in fact, a distress born of love for the human race. At the same time, countless inexpressible thoughts are instilled in them about the loving anguish the Lord felt when he considers the state of the human race, or considered the state of the human race. That phrase there, loving anguish, that idea that God can feel distress and God can feel the sadness, and that again, that word compassion, calm with passion, suffering, that idea that God can be there with us in those moments is so incredibly important, because it's easy to feel that God is totally absent, that God only shows up when it's 80 degrees and sunny. And the fact is, God is closer to us, and this is a piece of just Christian thought throughout centuries, that God is closer to us in our suffering than any other time of our life. And again, that's very much the Easter story. I mean, even this morning, I was reading the headlines from the New York Times. We get here at the house, and the headline was this sense of kinship that has grown among those going through the fires out there in California. That's God's presence, and it's strangely part of this suffering with. We see this suffering with, and this loving anguish that takes place. You can feel like distress at times. And yet that also creates openings where God can work and move forward. And it doesn't mean that we embrace distress. It doesn't mean that it's all a mental game that we can just be like, look, just be happy. You don't ever want to tell somebody that. Yeah, good luck with that. Distress is distress. Anguish is anguish. Pain is pain. And we move through it as best we can, sometimes by the day, sometimes down to just trying to manage it for the minute. And at the same time, I think we're asked to remember that God's with us in those moments, and that there's a peace in our heart. And here I'm saying Peace. There's a peace in our heart that's very deeply instilled by God. It's not always easy to touch when we're in moments of pain, but it's there, and it will make itself known at some point in time. And pain is never the end of the story. I mean, that's a beautiful part of having the bigger picture. So the takeaway for today is it's just this memory, just this remembering that God's with us. He's with us in our pain and our challenges. We don't have a God as Christians. We don't have a God detached from that all, or a God who doesn't care about that all, or a God who's got this big old obstacle course test that is life. It's not that at all. It's It's a much quieter, much more beautiful presence that we find in times of suffering, and it's a view of God that is really robust. I know for me, some people go through large doubts about God. It can really be a test of faith, and that's understandable. I feel for me, it hasn't been going through times of pain, and I think a lot of that is we just get that God is not here to test us or find these easy solutions. God's here to give us the peace of heart to walk through the pain of life with. And especially when you read the Easter story, it just we all have our individual Easters, and when we read the Easter story, it's just so obvious about how God holds suffering, and that suffering is part of the equation, and that God meets us there as well. So that's the thought for today, friends. I hope that makes sense. And again, it's a service probably more for those people who are immediately struggling with it, but we either all are struggling with it or we know people who are, and hope that brings a little sense of peace to your life. So with that, friends, what we're going to do now we're going to shift gears. And as we shift gears, what we're going to do is we're going to take a little breath, little meditation, little prayer, little blessing, and then we'll say hi to folks on Facebook. So, friends, let's start out with getting a little breath. A little meditation. Be still and know that I am God. Be still and know that I am. Be still and know that I. Be still and know that. Be still and know. Be still and. Be still. Be. Our Father, who art in the heavens, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, as in heaven, so upon the earth. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our debts, as we also forgive our debtors. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory forever. Amen. May the Lord bless you and keep you. May the Lord make his face to shine upon you and be gracious unto you. May the Lord lift up his countenance upon you, bring you peace, and bring you home. Amen. All right, dear friends, let's give a little cheery hello to folks who are joining us here online this morning. Does load on up. All righty. And just give me a second here. There we go. All right, no comments this morning. All right, friends, feel free to leave archived comments